because everyone should know this story. It's a big kind of founding document of our country. So I think the first reading for this, it's the first third of the book, is due October 5th. So I think you've got a little while, but just look at your schedule or look at the like Canvas assignments and you can see what the reading is for that. But for now you can put it away. It's kind of a flimsy copy, so just be careful with it.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Are these aren't ours, right?
So you get to take them home with you, yeah, but they're not yours to keep. So you can't write inside them. I think the assignment says to do annotations, and so you would either need to get your own copy of it, or you would just use Post-it notes. Yeah, use sticky notes for it. You don't get to keep it, unfortunately. Maybe next year I'll make them buy it and they can keep it. It's a very cheap copy. If you do want to buy your own, I think it's $4.99 on Amazon, I want to say. All right, now you need your word of the day. Pull that out. Count how many spaces you have left on that for me.
3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, we didn't do it last time.
Yeah, we didn't do
No, we didn't get to it last time. So you have 6 left?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Then we're gonna fill up all 6 of those.
Right now?
Yes, sir.
Wait, what?
We're doing the words of the day. All right, so you remember our rhetorical triangle
Yeah.
and how it's got over here writer, which is associated with ethos, audience, which is associated with pathos, and then subject. Did you just correct it, me, the way I said it? No, you say it
No.
pathos, but it's okay to call it
No,
pathos.
I was just joking.
And then subject, which is
Did I
logos.
say that out loud?
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay to pronounce it pathos. I mean, the smart people like me are gonna say pathos.
Oh.
I did not see any E's in there to make an A noise.
All right, so in this rhetorical triangle, it's it can be, I don't like that arrow. It can be kind of easy to talk about pathos. I think that's the one that we want to talk about the most. And even ethos makes a lot of sense to talk about because we're just talking about how the writer makes themselves credible. It is very hard for students to write about logos. And the reason is because talking about logic is difficult. There is a whole mathematical system to like learning logic. You can major in logic in college and you will take multiple classes learning how logic works. I didn't major in logic in college, so I couldn't possibly teach you that. Also, it's not, the whole point of this class is not to learn logic. So instead, I'm going to give you 6 different claim types that you can learn to recognize in someone's writing. And based on those 6 claim types, you could have something to say about how that writer is structuring their paper logically. So we're going to have, for each box, we're going to have a different claim type. So the first one is, let's start with resemblance claim. So that's the first word of the day. A resemblance claim is when you compare one thing to another. Pretty basic. You're comparing one thing to another. So when you are making a resemblance claim, you are saying this thing is like this other thing, and so we should treat them the same way. So for example, all of mine are going to be kind of based, this was supposed to go with the lesson last time, so they're all kind of based on Black Lives Matter stuff. For example, you could say, here's your example, the BLM movement is like the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s. And I've seen this argument being made. Lots of people will make this argument that the Black Lives Matter movement is similar to past civil rights movements that we've had. The reason for making resemblance claims is because you're trying to borrow the reputation of something and bring it over to the reputation of something new. So the effect of this is going to be that, and under effects, I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about how the structure works too. You're going to explain the attitudes around the commonly understood event or thing, understood thing. In this case, we commonly understand the civil rights movement. Like, we understand that that was kind of a net positive for the country. People will argue about how much positive or how much good the civil rights movement did, but there are very few people who are going to say, oh, the civil rights movement, I wish that had never been a part of our history. Like, that is a commonly understood positive aspect of our history, right? So you explain the attitudes around that commonly understood thing, explaining how great the civil rights movement was. And then, so you explain the attitudes, then compare to the less understood thing. So you're saying, see, these commonly understood attitudes that we have, all these positive emotions that we feel towards the civil rights movement, we're supposed to take that and then apply it to the new thing that maybe we don't have a common understanding of yet. So another example of this that I hear in Utah a lot is Utah liquor laws are like prohibition laws in the 1920s. No one thinks prohibition was a good idea. Like, ultimately, actually, people think it was a good idea, but it didn't play out. So nobody thinks prohibition worked. You think back to the 1920s, nobody is like, oh, that was good that we got rid of alcohol. Lots of positive effects from that. No, it like caused like a whole bunch of like, you know, organized crime and like corruption, and nobody did it anyway, etc. So when you say that Utah's liquor laws are like those laws, you're saying, see, Utah liquor laws are also ineffective and terrible. So you're like borrowing from the commonly understood thing. Does that make sense? Noble, what were you saying?
I like basically, I was gonna have to figure it out.
Yes. Yeah, you can do it with negative things. You're trying to just borrow the attitudes about that one. All right, that's a resemblance claim. That's one type of logical claim that you could talk about if you find that. Number 2 is a causal claim.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
It's gonna sound weird, Mike, but like if you wanted to compare something that has negative connotation and something has a positive connotation, you could flip it. So you could say like Santa Claus is like Nicolas Cage, or you could say Nicolas Cage is like Santa Claus, and then it's like, wow, that's really cool. Like,
Yes. Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, you could. Especially if you've got two things that are kind of commonly understood. You're just like figuring out sort of new ways of looking at them.
if I wanted to say the temperance laws in the 1920s are like probably the laws now, be like, oh, okay, like that's
If you call it temperance laws or
prohibition, either way, just like if you flip them around.
so if you said, yes, yeah, it would work. It's hard though if you're trying to make, it just depends what you're trying to make the argument about. What are you trying to change people's perceptions of? You would always have that one be second. Yeah. Okay, causal claim is what caused something, and or it could be either one. What will something cause? The definitions here are pretty badly worded, but you get the idea. So a causal claim, what caused something and what will that thing cause? And so basically you are just creating a cause and effect chain. So something like, because people looted small businesses during the BLM protests, conservatives were less likely to listen to the message. Okay. I tried to get all over the political spectrum with my examples, but here's an example. Because people looted small businesses during the BLM protests, conservatives were less likely to listen to the message. This is an argument that this is not set in stone. This is argumentative, right? There's all sorts of reasons that conservatives both did and didn't listen to the message of the Black Lives Matter movement. There's both, you know, there's all sorts of reasons that, all sorts of effects that looting had, but you're figuring out one sort of causal chain to make an argument for. So the effects here, what you're going to do is create a chain of cause and effect. This will have these consequences. you run into logical problems with this. Like you might, if you're in stats class, you might run into this idea that correlation is not causation, right? But you're making the argument that it is causation. So you're trying to figure out, how do I convince people about what the causes of something are and what the effects of something are? It's pretty obvious when you see cause and effect claims. All right, number 3. This is an ethical claim. For this, you are trying to figure out how right or wrong something is in terms of ethics and morals, how right or wrong something is. So for this one, you're asking yourself, like, I don't know, it's hard to put it in like sin terms, but almost like how righteous or how sinful something is. You're thinking about it in terms of ethics. So I think like, oh, I wrote this one down. All right, here's our example. No matter how angry you are, it is not okay to pee on a police vehicle.
Yes, it is.
Like I said, trying to cover all the political spectrum here. No matter how angry you are, it is not okay to pee on a police vehicle. That would be an example of an ethical claim. Because you're trying to talk about something that can be as subjective as ethics, and you're trying to make a claim about how right or wrong it is. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the effects of this, the way that you go about doing this, when you're thinking about logic, when you're trying to appeal to someone's logic, you're usually thinking about consequences. So thinking about a list of consequences and weighing those consequences. So you're trying to say, oh, here are all the things that can happen from peeing on a cop car. You could go to jail for vandalism. You could be seen immodestly. You could have, immodest images on social media. You could be seen as like pretty gross. There's all these different consequences. You could have your language arts talking about it for years to come, etc. There could be positive consequences too. You could say, oh, I'm sorry, I wrote too low on the board. Let me know if you need me to repeat something. There could be positive consequences though. Like you could have it be like, and she brought attention to the cause. But you weigh those pros and cons and you see which ones weigh heavier. And if it's the cons that weigh heavier, then you can make this argument that it's wrong. Yeah. Oh, sorry. It says, so you think about a list of consequences and then weigh those consequences. So pros and cons. Think about the pros and cons of the action. So like cheating in school, we could do an ethical argument. It is wrong to cheat in school. Pros, you get a good grade maybe. Pros, you get some sleep because you didn't have to do the assignment, right? What's another pro? You impress your teacher with your extended knowledge. Cons, you potentially get in trouble and get a 0 on it. Cons, you might fail the class. Cons, you might have like your teachers hate you so much, right? And so you kind of weigh, okay, is it right or wrong for this particular action? All right, you got it? Causal?
Did you cheat?
Or ethical? I cheated once, but I was very bad at it and I got caught.
Are you serious?
Yeah, my only C in high school.
What was your kind of cheating? Like, what is that?
Oh, I used my notes on a test. So I was like sick on the day of the test. And then we took it in like a testing center and I used my notes and I told the testing center lady, I was like, oh no, we're allowed to use notes on this. And she was like, no, you're not. And then I got a 0 on the test. Yeah, I was not a smart cheater, but it was because I wasn't used to it because I was such a good kid. All right.
Right.
All right, evaluation claim. Yeah, there's gonna be 6 of them.
6.
Yes, so we got 2 more after this. So evaluation claim is when you are deciding how great or I don't know, not great something is.
That's really deep. That feels like a
Great or not great. Yeah, so you're trying to decide like how does something fit into a certain class. So for example, you're trying to evaluate it and say how good it is, but not good in the ethical way. That's why I have a hard time talking about it. You're trying to say how great or subpar something is. So Jurassic Park is the best movie of all time. That would be an evaluation claim. I'm saying it's the best of its class. So an example of this would be peeing on a cop car is an effective way to protest. There we go. So here I'm trying to decide, how good or bad something is. I'm thinking about how effective it is in this case, but you could think of it in all different ways of classifying it. So I'm saying peeing on a cop car is an effective way to protest, and the effects for this one is, the structure of this is I determine the parameters. I determine the parameters of a certain category. So in this case, I determine the parameters of what would be an effective protest, what makes an effective protest. And I would have all of these things that kind of define the parameters of that. And then I would say, determine if the object I'm evaluating, or the phenomenon or whatever, fits those parameters. All right, so let's go back to my Jurassic Park example. If I say Jurassic Park is the greatest movie of all time, sometimes I'll have students say, well, but that's subjective. You can't say what the greatest movie is for me or not. If that were true, we wouldn't have any criticism whatsoever. There would be no such thing as film critics, right? We have a whole culture of evaluative arguments. We have whole careers based on evaluative arguments. So what you have to do to make your case is you have to define the category. So if I say the best movie of all time is full of action, has great special effects, it must star Jeff Goldblum, and it has to have some kind of feminist message. Those are the categories I'm setting up for the best movie of all time. And then you would say, and Jurassic Park has all 4 of those.
Wow.
So it is the best movie of all
Wow,
time.
great effects.
So you could have people argue against you. They could argue against the parameters or whether or not the thing fits into the parameters, but that's how you make the evaluative argument. So you can definitely, it's based on opinion, yes, but all arguments are based on opinion. So you can definitely make the argument. All right, next one. Let's erase some board space here. All right, this one, number 5 is a proposal. What am I calling them? Claims, right? Yeah, proposal claim. So it's answering the question, what do we do about a problem? Or what is the best course of action? So one example of this would be like the only way to achieve civil harmony would be to pee on a cop car, would be to, let's look at a real one, defund the police. So when they have those signs that say defund the police, abolish the police, that is a proposal argument that they are making. They're saying, I propose that we take this course of action to fix the problem. So when you're doing this kind of essay, you have to establish the problem first. Establish the problem as a problem. You're saying this is something that we all need to recognize as a problem. And it might be that that's where the argument kind of sits for a minute, where you're trying to convince people that it actually is a problem that we have. But then once you do that, you can propose a solution. And then you can justify the costs of the solution. And I put costs in quotation marks because sometimes the cost is monetary, it is money. Sometimes it's like, oh, we have a parking problem. My solution is a bigger parking garage. Now I need to justify the cost of that parking garage. Or it can be something metaphorical. Defund the police, well, that's going to cause, some problems with, the way, and argumentatively, but the way that society functions, and so we need to justify that cost in quotations. But either way, that's kind of the way we go for it. Last one.
Wait, Dr. Brock?
Yeah.
How many essays do we have to write on the test?
Three.
Grace
Rhetorical analysis, argument, and synthesis.
is telling me how his hand is like shaking.
After one.
After 3.
All right, last one is called a definitional claim. You are arguing what category something fits in or doesn't fit in. All right, I saved this one for last because this is what your Scarlet Letter transcendental essays are. So let me give you an example of what that could look like. Example. Because operation. Letter. Okay. So for a definitional claim, you are trying to say, this is how something fits into a category. Definitions are not set in stone. Even definitions for things that we think are like, 20 years ago, I thought I knew what the word lit meant. And then 10 years ago, that definition was challenged and changed and expanded to mean something totally different, right? So definitions can change all the time. And we have some words that are very hard to define. Like, what is art? That becomes like a whole discussion for a whole field of thought. Or what qualifies as torture? That became like a huge political discussion for years and years. So in this case, I am asking you to say, what is transcendentalism? Like, what qualifies as transcendentalism? And then you can say whether or not the Scarlet Letter fits into that. So if you were doing this for art, for example, there is a very famous piece of art by Duchamp. Has anyone seen the Armut urinals? Okay, so there's this artist named Duchamp, modernist artist, who there's 6 of these. He just got a urinal. He didn't make the urinal, he just got one. I don't know how you get one, but he got one. He deviously licked a urinal, yeah. And he put it on a pedestal, and he wrote on it, R. Mutt. He signed R. Mutt. That's not his name, but he signed that on the urinal. There were 6 of them, and they are now in all of our most famous modern art museums. Like, you can see one in the Pompidou in France, one of the most famous art museums ever. And there have been debates ever since, I mean, before him, but about this one too. Is this art? Does this qualify as art?
No.
The only way to make that argument is if you can define what art is, and then you can decide if it fits into that category, right? So in a lot of ways, definition is a little bit like evaluation, where you're trying to say, here's what qualifies as the thing, and here's if that thing qualifies. All right, so if that's my definitional claim, how am I going to go about writing this essay? This will be helpful to you when you're writing your essay, I hope. So for my effects, first, I need to define the category. So for your assignment, you're thinking about one tenet of transcendentalism. In this case, I am thinking about individuality as a form of transcendentalism, or as a part of transcendentalism. And I'm going to need a couple paragraphs to explain how the transcendentalists felt about the individual. And this is where I'll use quotations from transcendentalists, and I'll say, here's what it is. All right, then need to explain parts of the novel that I will use to make the match. So this is when I need to explain that the Scarlet Letter does actually focus on individual happiness, and that ultimately it's a way to create a community that cooperates to each other. That's probably going to take me a couple paragraphs to explain how that works in the book. And then you make the match. So you say, because transcendentalism is about this, and the book is about this, the book is a transcendentalist novel.
It won the most influential artwork of the 20th century.
I mean, we're talking about it now. It influenced me, I guess. Are you looking at it? It's beautiful, isn't it?
I don't know, was it even like a pretty song or just like?
It's like in black, like paint on the side.
Yeah, it looks like he did it on accident.
Let's see, wait, what's it called again?
It looks like somebody like wrote on a urinal in a high school and he said, wow, that's hot. And then he took it.
Yeah.
Sent it.
I actually love that.
Yeah. It's like, this is art. It's sort of about the commercialism of art, and like it's kind of making fun of critics, and he's acting on his whims, yes.
He brought the urinal to his studio, reoriented it 90 degrees from its original intended position of use, and wrote on it Arma 1970.
Oh, we didn't get the reorientation. There's the art. We turned it 90 degrees. Of course it's art.
Whoa.
Art. Yep. And there's 6 of them too. He managed to sell 6 of those. Does it say how much they sold for?
The one of them right now is worth $2 million.
That is so cool. That is so cool. He really, I mean, that's like, that's a dank meme before there were ever dank memes.
Wait, why do I actually want one?
They just like duct taped a banana to a canvas.
That's
And they
why
couldn't
it's like-
even keep it because it
Someone,
rotted.
didn't someone try and eat it?
I think they had to because it rotted. It would have rotted. Art is stupid.
You see things where it's like, thank you for joining the like the online art contest. The winner gets $2,000.
Oh, yeah.
When you chose the first place, it's like a 6-year-old went like.
No, I
And
didn't.
second place was like a Labrador, like black and white sketch.
Yeah, but here's the smart, here's the smart one.
You buy it for
put it
$2
in my
million.
manual.
You're like, okay, I have this work of
It's
art. It's a
bathroom
urinal.
I take the leak.
It's a status symbol
But
is what it
that's
is.
a conversation starter. You have that in your living room and the people come over and sit down on the couch. So let's talk about my urinal.
They don't
shall
need to
we?
talk about it because they see it and they say, this person is rich. That's all they need to know.
Oh, I'm rich because
I don't know.
have
If I were to walk into someone's house and they have a urinal hanging on their wall, I'm gonna leave.
Okay, let's return to this definitional claim, the Scarlet Letter one. Is that making more sense for how to do your Scarlet Letter essays now?
Yeah, I wish I didn't do it last night.
Yeah, I see now.
Well, okay, so you did it in a different order maybe, or you did it differently than this. That's okay. I wanted to get this for those of you who maybe haven't started yet and you need to know like what the actual project is. You're basically doing a compare and contrast paper, and that is what a definitional claim is. So however you did it, just make sure it's got transitions.
Oh, it fits that
Okay.
pretty well. So.
Good, yeah.
Speaking of essays, your end of month comes up in like 4 days, right?
September 30th. Yes, it's coming up. Thank you.
Wait, will we be able to rewrite this?
Yeah.
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 Oh, that's my
Yeah,
guess.
anything that's not graded yet, which now everything is graded that you've turned in, I believe.
It is.
Yeah, but anything that is not graded, you have until October 8th to do. So that will be just the Scarlet Letter papers. You'll be able to rewrite those. I think I'm gonna have my grader grade those though. Okay, let's do it.
Oh, wait, maybe we should be nice.
Wait,
No,
the
Grader's
It's probably gonna be
meaner.
really harsh.
My grader's very nice. She always tells everyone they did a great job and then gives them a low score. I will make sure that the grades are fair. I always do. Okay.
So the first essay rewrite, do this.
Yes, so for Transcendental 1 and Transcendental 2, if you want to rewrite those papers, they are due by September 30th at midnight. Okay. Okay, these are the ethical claims.
I
Yes,
remember, for the, what we were talking about, the rewrites,
yes.
do we like rewrite it if I was typing it up online? Do I do it in another color and keep the essay the same, but like? or do I
No,
just
great
edit it?
question. And I don't think I've ever explained like kind of what I'm looking for rewrite. So You do not need to start out from scratch when you are rewriting it. It's not like I want you to start out with a blank page. But you've got to know that I haven't commented on every single thing that I think you could improve in that essay. There's no way I'm going to go through every sentence and see how it could be perfect. I try to use my comments to point out a specific place where you do something that you might do throughout the essay that I think you need to think about throughout the essay. So if I point out, oh, you're vague here, that doesn't mean it's the only place where you are being vague. You're vague maybe in other places through that essay. So what you do is you just go sentence by sentence, try and make it as perfect as it can be according to my comments, but also according to what you've learned, since then. And then you just turn it in as though it were your first paper to that same assignment. And I don't even look, I usually look at the old paper just to see sort of the gist of my comments. And then I grade the new one just as its own thing.
Did you say there are 2 essays?
That we've done? Or,
That we're gonna write, like 2 transcendentals?
no, just this one.
The rewrite.
Oh, I feel better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just this one. This is kind of our bigger assignment for the year. It's only 2 to 3 pages though. You guys realize that, yeah? It's not that long. It's a tough brain activity. This is kind of the term paper for us. All right. Do you have any more questions about that?
When is the semester then?
Semester for our class, we stop grades on October 8th. So anything that's due after October 8th does not go on this
October
quarter.
8th?
That's so soon.
Yeah, then there's one more week until fall break. So what's that, the 16th or something? And then that's the end of the quarter. All right. Let's talk about how to apply this stuff now to when you're thinking about rhetoric. So you guys got your civil rights packet?
Hypothetically.
You're gonna open to, I should have numbered them. I'm never gonna learn to number the pages. You're gonna open it to the second essay in there called Abolitionist Rhetoric. Yes, who else doesn't have one? Wait, you have one and you just need one for today? Okay, just don't write on it.
I made sure.
Does anyone else need to borrow one for
strengthen
today?
My transcendentalism of this one. Listen,
All right, for this activity, you need a partner. Where is it?
It's like, yeah.
And you can be in a group of 3 if you would like to as well, if that's more convenient. All right, so now you should be open to abolitionist rhetoric, and you should have a yellow page, and you should have a partner. Does anyone not have a partner yet? Raise your hand. Okay, good. Oh wait, some people might not have a partner. Okay, I'm gonna give you 15 seconds. Make sure you got a partner. If you don't, no worries, I'll pair you up. Okay, now does someone not have a partner? All right, so I'm going to divide the class. There's 3 pieces of rhetoric here. We're going to look at the first 2. So we're looking at an excerpt from Benjamin Lay, and we're looking at an excerpt from David Walker. So if you are on this side of the room, you're going to do Benjamin Lay. And if you're in a partnership where it's split, just decide which one you want. And if you're on this side of the room, you're going to do David Walker. All right. Benjamin Lay is awesome. This guy was, he like completely put his money where like his ideas, or he lived his ideas. That's what I want to say. He lived in a cave on the outskirts of society. He was a vegan, but like to the extreme where he wouldn't even like wear. Yes, yeah, and he like wouldn't, oh, he drank milk. He wasn't a vegan, but he drank milk. He wouldn't eat anything or like wear anything that would had anything to do with the slave trade, which like in America during the 1700s, everything had to do with the slave trade. So he basically had to remove himself from society completely to spin his own wool and make his own clothes, and just a very interesting, cool guy. David Walker, also a very interesting, cool guy. He was the son of an enslaved man and a free Black woman. He was eventually freed. I can't remember exactly how, but then he would travel all around and he writes this amazing book called Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World. Most abolitionist texts were geared towards white people to try and convince them to join the abolitionist cause. David Walker was like, don't worry about white people. Like, this is about us. Let's try and figure out how we're going to revolt. So very cool, both of them. You're going to find claim types in their essays. There are at least 4 different claim types in each of these excerpts. So you need to find 3 of them. Under claim type on the yellow sheet, you're just going to put the name of the claim. This is the proposal claim, or this is the definitional claim. Then under the 3 categories, I think I've been really clear about what I want you to do in each of those. So yes, follow the instructions at the top, and I'll come around and check and see if you're being detailed enough. But I think that's all the info you need. So you're reading just your excerpt, the one that I assigned you, and finding different claim types in it. All right, go ahead. If you are working at home, then you can choose whichever one you want to do, Benjamin Lay or David Walker. One of the ways that you talk about logic is you break down that logic and you're showing how and why one thing leads to another. So even if the writer doesn't include these transitions, you're thinking about the transitions between his idea to create this logical path to a conclusion. And it looks like in your bullet points as I was going around, you were doing that, showing how one thing leads to the other and how this creates a kind of logic for the audience. So the reason you write things logically is because we are rational people. And so you are appealing to someone's sense of rationality or reasonability when you kind of lay things out in pieces like that. You say this plus this equals this logical claim. And all the different claims have different structures that work the best for those kinds of claims. All right, we're going to shift gears and talk about pathos now. Writing about pathos is a lot easier than writing about logos, but you kind of have to know the audience really well to be able to understand how the writer is appealing to that audience. So I want to give you some background knowledge on what's called the slave narrative today. You'll write this in your notes. Let me collect those yellow pages, actually. I'll give you some points for those. Why don't you pass those up? Yeah, write your name on it and pass them up. Depends how far you got. How far did you get? Yeah, you'll get. I will be nice. You were working on it. You're good. All right, so pass those up for me.
Wait, are those like the?
name.
Triangle?
Right. Okay. All right. So take some notes on what qualifies as a slave narrative for this next part. So this is going to help us explain who the audience is for these stories. So this is a generic term, meaning it was a genre of writing in the 1800s, probably starting around 1820s and through until like the 1900s. It even extended a little ways past the end of the Civil War. People were still interested in reading these kinds of stories. It was actually a really popular genre. Lots of people bought these books. I mean, mostly people from the North, people who it kind of already supported their worldview. But people, these books could be bestsellers. So it's a generic memoir. and is meant to convey the experience of living as a slave and escaping slavery. That's really important. All of these books include some sort of story about how the writer escaped slavery. And it is meant to convey that to a primarily white audience. And the purpose is always for the purpose of advancing abolitionist cause. Which means that the purpose of the slave narrative was always to convince people to join the cause to end slavery. And most of the people that need convincing of that are white people. So convincing white people to join the abolitionist cause. And that meant donating money. It meant supporting, at one point it meant supporting the Civil War and the North's efforts in the Civil War. It meant participating in the Underground Railroad. It meant harboring, fugitive slaves. It meant writing to your senator, all of those different ways they wanted people to get involved. These slave narratives were meant to help people want to get involved that way. And because it's generic, that means that almost all slave narratives share certain qualities. So number one, in the very beginning, so the genre characteristics, the first thing that it would include always was some kind of portrait. And often that portrait was meant to convey one of two things. One, it was meant to convey the ethos of the writer, to say, look, this person is established, nice set of clothes, nice haircut, etc. Or the portrait was meant to convey the evils of slavery. So it might start with a portrait where you see scars or you see something grotesque about that writer's body, so that it can say, look, this person really did experience these things. Yeah, Lexi.
Sorry, does that say genre character?
Oh, characteristics.
But it says genre, right?
Yeah, genre characteristics. All right, so number one, you'll have a portrait at the beginning of the book. And then there will be testimonials from white readers. So often these will be important figures in the abolitionist cause, people who kind of run meetings and so on. They would have some sort of testimonial at the beginning, and they always claim friendship with the writer. So they'll say something like, this man was a close friend of mine, is a close friend. And they will insist on the accuracy of the story. So this is,
Like it's not true, like claiming friendship and insisting on accuracy. Is it like
I am going with the why would they be an authority? That's where my skepticism comes from. So it'll be like some prominent white guy who reads Frederick Douglass's story and says, this is a friend of mine and his story is accurate, as though he would have any idea of what Frederick Douglass actually experienced, right? So it wouldn't be like Frederick Douglass's sister that says, oh yeah, he really did experience this. I was there too. It's just some guy that Frederick Douglass met far after the fact saying, yes, it is true.
So it's like,
Yes, meant to assure white readers that this is a Black man that we can trust. That's basically what it is. Yeah. So you'll have testimony from white readers. You'll have a couple of them at the beginning usually.
I'm white.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah. All right. And then almost all of them start with, I was born. And then they give the circumstances of the birth. They say where the person was born. They say roughly what year, although many of these slave narratives, they don't know what year they were actually born, but they'll say roughly what year. And then they will give, here I'll move to the side so you guys can actually see, number 4, an account of the parentage. And often that is blurry, that is insecure. They aren't totally sure who their parents were. And often that is because the slave master was their father. So there are multiple slave narratives by slaves who say, we're not sure who my dad is, but probably I'm half white and probably it was the slave master, but we're not totally sure.
So that's like not figuratively, like they're my master, they're my father.
No,
like, it's
literally. Yeah, literally. But it's always speculation. So it's always sort of like, we think this is the case, but we're not so sure. So usually there will be some sort of account of parentage. This is who my mother was. This is probably who my father was. All right, so that's kind of the beginnings of the book. And then you get into what actually occurs in all of these books. There is always a description of cruelty under a master. And usually there will be kind of a hierarchy of masters, like there will be one slave owner who is extremely cruel in the way that it often includes depictions of whippings. And it will be like, this is the guy that was the most evil. And then there will often be slave owners who were not quite as evil, but the narrative will point out why they're complicit in the system anyway. So it will point out how, and this was the slave owner that was actually, let me work and try and earn back my living, but here's why he also was evil. So it would include one kind of graphic depiction at least, though. I said complicit, but complacent, yes. Yeah. All right, I think they both work there. All right, then they will have an account, usually, of one slave who resists beatings. And this seems counterintuitive, but often that will be a positive account. So it will be a story of somebody who stood up to the slave master and said, like, you can't do this to me anymore. And something will happen to that slave, like they will be sold somewhere else that was actually better for them, or they will escape the situation, or they will never be beat again. It was like often positive accounts of somebody standing up to the slave master and like exerting their sort of individual will and that being rewarded in some way.
So it's not like
In this particular bit of the genre, there is that story too in these stories, but there will be like one instance where that person, like, it was a good thing they stood up to him.
I thought it was like.
Not in these stories. Yeah.
So did they like develop this sort of outline?
Yeah.
So they just like they were like, okay, but
They would fit sort of into the genre. Yeah, hang on, I'll talk about that in a second.
That's like the teen movies nowadays.
Yeah.
The teen novels, like
Hallmark?
Hunger Games or.
Yeah, any kind of genre like that they'll have.
They just are the exact same.
Mhm.
Studios.
Yeah.
Hunger Games study.
All right, another thing, let's get all of them written down, then we'll talk sort of about the general effects of having a genre like this. They point out always the reading and writing, that slaves were not allowed to read and write. This is essential for a slave narrative because now we have a slave who is actually reading and writing. And so they will point out that that was a barrier for them to overcome. All right, sorry, I'm going to move over here for the rest of them. Number 8, they will usually have some sort of description of the Christianity of the slave master, and often that will be used with the trope of having of a particularly cruel slave master. There will usually be some sort of depiction of Christianity as being hypocritical. Number 9, there will be an account of the exchange. It's very interesting to me. They'll have something like the amount of work they had to do, amount they had to work. So like, for example, we had to pick this many pounds of cotton in a day, or we had to labor for this many hours. And then it will be like amount they got in return, which is like, and we got some mush with, maggots in it. So it will talk about sort of like how capitalism works under slavery. And then last one, there will usually be an account of a slave auction and the breaking up of families. All right, so it doesn't necessarily go in that order. From here on out, the order kind of can be in any sort of order, but these are genre tropes that almost all of these stories include. And as you are looking at this, like think back to the movies you've seen. If you've seen 12 Years a Slave or Roots or Harriet Tubman, actually no, that one doesn't fit into it. What are some others from the, I don't know, what other, have you seen any of these movies? Accounts of slavery? Okay, well, in the 90s, this was an extremely popular genre of movie as well. And if you had seen any of those, you notice that it still has all of these tropes. This is a trope that started with the slave narrative in the 1800s, and then we still kind of like think of slave narratives with these particular tropes. So someone asked, like, would they just make it up? No, they wouldn't make it up. It was true. And I mean, as far as I know, and as far as these white men tell us, it was true, right? But they were just sort of carefully picking things that fit into a kind of genre. So next time I want to start with this and talking about why generic writing like this would appeal to someone's sense of pathos. Like, why would they want it to fit into these kind of tropes in order to make their point? And we can talk about maybe why that might be a little bit problematic too.
Kind of like.
Yeah. Yep.
No, I thought it's
Hidden
fine.
Figures